Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society in general. I am Father George Ehusani, and today I have with me in the studio Onize Ohikere. The young shall grow, right?
Yes, Father.
I have with me in the studio a young person, and the young shall grow, Onize Ohikere. Onize Ohikere is a journalist. She is the Africa correspondent of World News Group, a US-based magazine.
Yes,
she's the Africa correspondent of World News Group, a US-based magazine. She covers Africa for that magazine. So you travel around.
Yes, most times, depending on where the news takes us.
Where the news takes you.
Yes, Father.
Great. So welcome. I have brought Onize to the studio today as a young person to discuss issues of youth. We keep talking about the young people, children, youths are the leaders of tomorrow. Now, but what does tomorrow look like with the kind of young people that we see growing up in our society? In recent times, I have visited secondary schools and universities and had chats with young people. And the vibrations I get, I am not very comfortable. I begin to see that there is a lot of fascination with celebrities. A lot of our young people are constantly following celebrities, behaving like the celebrities, having the values of the celebrities. In recent months, there is a new sheriff in town, and the name is Malians. All over the place, secondary schools, universities, you are hearing of Malians. And what are these Malians? What do they stand for? What do they represent? I'm told they represent some musician whose songs are propagating just anything reckless. Don't obey any laws. Don't wear underwear on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Don't graduate. Smoke Igbo, smoke marijuana. Do all that society used to consider to be uncivil, to be criminal. The songs are promoting them. And what shocks me is that young people are following him. And that I go to a school and the counselor calls me and says, Father, half of our students are Malians. What can we do about it? And then I verify from the students and they say, yeah, a lot of them are Malians and they are excited about being Malians. In recent times on social media and in the regular media, there's been a lot of talk about this whole movement towards incivility, towards behaviors that would be considered not just immoral, but uncivil, to the extent that people will be in schools and universities without a target to graduate, but to misbehave and be suspended and be expelled. Onize, you belong to the age group between those of us who are old and those who are coming up, who are still in secondary schools and universities. What's going on? What do you think is going on? I have brought you because maybe you would understand the situation better than myself, better than people of my generation. If, as Ohikere had declared, that the old people, they are a lost generation, are we about to lose another generation, or have we already lost it?
No, hopefully we believe there are things that can still be done. But maybe I would start by looking beyond the Malian trend, because with every young generation, you have a person or an image who sort of pushes and stands as like an element representing the different vices that the young people need to confront. And in this case, we can say in this present time now, that's Naira Marley. And, you have those who follow some of these trends. There are many people who listen to the music and take nothing more to it beyond listening to the song, which is one side. And then you have others who take it a step further. And we, in church on Sunday, we discussed where a lot of people said, on one hand, they see it as a marketing scheme. And yeah, you can say it's a marketing scheme, but for some people who don't have a solid background, it can go beyond that.
Marketing scheme for his music?
For his music, because a lot of the activities you're seeing, there's a very high chance that he's not aware that some of those activities are going on. Most of the videos you see is a group of young people who gather themselves together talking about going without underwear and other things. So he is not necessarily involved in that process.
Yeah, but even talking about marketing strategies for his music, what does his music constitute? What kind of messages? I mean, from what I hear, the kind of things that people are talking about are the things he says in his music.
Exactly. And so for us, what we're seeing is the starting or the base point for us is, you would always have those people singing those songs. But for us as young people, what we're trying to focus on is what can we do within ourselves to get to a point where such things, or the artists realize that doesn't appeal to majority of young people anymore, and that trend would now have to change. And so starting from the very beginning, one of the things we've talked about is you're looking at how people are brought up, if you want to begin from that point of view, parenting. And so you have a case where on one hand, for instance, we could say a couple or a family, parents bring up their children where the basic values and virtues are inculcated in the home. The kids understand this not just from what the parents say, but from how they react with the kids and how they handle other people. And so from that, naturally, it flows into a situation where the young children regard as their role models would also reflect those values, whether we're talking about honesty, integrity, humility. And so once it reflects into that, you now find out that as they get older, the choices they make would also flow from that. So you have a tree flowing.
Actually, that was my initial worry. Why, if such a crazy guy and with those kind of ideas, why would it appeal to so many young people in our generation? Why would, I mean, as the counselor in the school told me, he said, half of these students are Malians. Why would so many, I mean, if some 2, 3, 4, 5 students in a school decide to go that crazy way, that's understandable. But why would large numbers of students
flow? So I guess the flip side of what I'm saying, you have a situation where, and just to set the base, this is understandable to an extent, we're in a society where in every conversation people are complaining the government or the money and all. There's just this fixation on things that are trivial, and you find out that if kids or children are brought up in homes where the values are not essential, but instead it's the end goal, where it's money making, prestige, fame, without the accompanying values, what you now have are kids who are willing to do anything possible to get there. And so as opposed to kids who are looking for models who value respect and integrity, these are people like you were talking about, kids who would just say, anything possible. If I get a picture with this celebrity, I know I would make it instantly. So there's that what they value is that instant.
The end justifies the means.
Instant gratification, anything possible to get to that point immediately. And so you have these two competing. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of younger people who are still in secondary schools, and I know some of them, they're like, they would occasionally listen to music if they like working with it. But when it comes to, you need to believe what this person says, you can't move them because they grew up in homes where and constantly
they had a foundation.
And when they come home on holidays, their parents still have conversations with them, have Bible sessions with them where it's open, and the kids feel the freedom to share what they think. The mom would say, you can lead a session on this, and they go back, they study, they present. The mom asks them questions, and they go through these processes. So when you have those two flip sides, and that's why I'm talking about hope, because I still believe, and I know some of the young people who would not give in to those things.
So your kid brother is not likely to be a Malian?
No, you can't get him to tell you just because you're out there that he shouldn't put on shoelaces. He wouldn't listen to that.
I mean, so we're back to the whole question of parenting. And a lot of people, young people who are in secondary schools and universities, have not been well parented.
Yes, sir.
That is why they are so gullible. That's why it's so easy for some crazy person with those kind of strange ideologies. The person might well be sick, right?
Yes.
The person might well need some psychological attention. And is able to influence these people because these young people don't have a solid moral, ethical foundation. What can we do? What can those in the older generation do, and what can people in your generation do to forestall that collapse?
Yes, sir. So I'm talking about parents who are still handling maybe the teenagers, and this is based on what I've seen in interactions with young people and what works for them. One of the main things for me is the way you interact with them. A lot of young people say, I don't feel comfortable speaking to my parents about A or B because I know immediately they're going to shut me down and give me a bulldozer of reasons why that's unacceptable. And, as parents, we already know our parents are aware. They see ahead of us, they already know that if you're walking this way, I know you're going to fall. But instead, how about if you have a situation where you walk and talk the child through the process? So it's okay, you want to get there. why do you think that's, the right
Parents
way?
listening to the
Listening,
children.
exactly.
And actually establishing a bond
Early on.
Yeah.
Early on, because that's the thing, and this is not saying, you can't discipline your child. Even if you discipline the child, after the discipline, do you follow up with the child for the child to actually understand why you beat them? Or do they just get to a point where it's, oh, I'm going to get hit for this again. All right, it's done. I'm moving on. Because if you can now do that, you now reach a point where, the child can understand, because they've walked through that process. Well, I thought about doing this, but this is what will happen. So they start understanding the whole concept of action and repercussions. And at the end of the day, if they reach that decision with you on why something is bad, at the end of the day, most children will still refuse and say it's just mommy being mommy. But deep down in them, they know it's the truth. So when they get older and they're confronted by things that question their values, they've already learned this habit of asking themselves why, what's going to be the end result of this. And so this is, long term, but short term, even with your relationship with the child, you find out that they are more willing to bring questions to you because they trust your process.
Now, so the whole challenge is the place to lay the foundation is the family.
At home.
But when you have, perhaps we are having a lot of people giving birth to children, marrying and giving birth to children who themselves never got the foundation. Meaning young parents who themselves need help because they were not well parented themselves. There are young parents, not just the secondary school and university students, but there are young parents who those values or these values we are talking about, they live like that. They live without discipline. They live without any order or without any serious moral norms. And they are raising children. So how are they going to help the situation?
So personally, I'm a firm believer in the power of community. And so it's, if focusing on young adults, for instance, and I sometimes like to quietly challenge systems or structures in a way that moves things forward, where, let's say growing up as a Catholic, you went through Sion, you went through the different processes for young adult groups. But how about we, get to a point where we can even have, beyond coming from meetings, groups where we follow up with each other. Many people, like you said, didn't learn these things at home, but how about having sessions where it's a two-pronged approach, where on one hand, you're still trying to recreate what they lost at home, where you create a safe environment where people can ask questions and get answers. That's where you bring in leaders from society, religious leaders who can come in and people can have open conversations about issues. And through that conversation, they'll pick up some of these values. Then on the flip side, activities that teaches them, because again, the way values become habits is through action. So give them the opportunity to actually exercise some of these things you're teaching them. Is it going out to assist people, have conversations after it? You're not just going to drop things in an orphanage home, but you have this long-term assistance to people. And
so beyond the parents,
Yes.
beyond the circle of the parents, the family, what can communities do? And a lot is possible. You're very correct. A lot is possible. A lot is possible in church environment. A lot is possible in other environments. But right now, with the mobile phone and the social media, we seem to be narrowing our lives to the individual. A lot of people do not belong to any groups. A lot of people do not have any bonds with society. They are constantly just focused on themselves and watching whatever they are watching on social media and not even greeting the neighbor. People are waiting by the bus. People are waiting somewhere, and whoever is sitting, people are taking flights for 7, 8, 9 hours and not talking to the next person because it's just working with the phone. How are we going to build that kind of community?
So for me, again, you're dealing with different generations through this. So, we always complain young people are constantly on their phones. And one thing I always believe is, even on a personal level in our faith, the first step is God meets us where we are and then lifts us out of there to where we should be. And so for me, the challenge I've been taking personally is, if the young people are constantly on social media, how about we revolutionize it? How about we revolutionize it and start using that to reach out to them? Like, for some examples, when I moved back to Abuja, I found out that I no longer had a community here anymore. And through Instagram, myself and my sister, we found out about a group, Young and Catholic. That was how I heard about them, through Instagram. searching for community. And I went for the first session, and I was completely amazed that there were young people in Abuja, young adults who are gathering together on weekends to have questions about their faith. During Lent, they have retreats, occasionally go out and do charity work together, and they're there. You can have up to 30 people in one day, and these things are there. And for me, that was what worked. But I've also found out, because the same thing with my sister, beyond our own group, and actually to add to that, the group addresses general questions of faith in general. So there are even people who are not Catholics who actually show up and ask questions. I've always wondered about this. What's your take on this? And that happens.
So groups of young people. Another group where young people can try to positively influence themselves, including religious groups.
Exactly.
And I know that even beyond church groups, there are other groups that exist in Abuja.
Yes. On Instagram, there's some that they're called volunteering groups, and what they do is, and this one even goes beyond just Abuja or Nigeria, where it's a volunteer page, and they try to connect young people across the continent, across Africa, to find out if they can, through that group, find connections with places where they can offer assistance, communities where they can help, whether it's by tutoring or giving an hour to assist the family. And through that volunteering, again, by learning values, you're putting yourself in places that would confront you to act out of empathy. And so if people can have the chance to connect more with people who are maybe even less fortunate than them, not only are you helping, but I feel like it awakens something in you where you realize, like, I can't believe people are living this way. I need to do something.
I remember, I don't know whether it was your set, but when we had the 2008 or 2009 summer
summer camp, yes.
Terra summer camp, when we went to Paduma and we saw those children that were severely burnt, I remember some in your set wept.
Yes, people cried.
I think you even wept. Yeah. Wept when they saw the deplorable condition that young people like them were living in. And I remember a family that actually adopted a child after that camp. Adopted a child, took care of the medical treatment, and made sure that that child was put in school, and so on and so forth. Meaning that in place of this, instead of this get rich quick, which these celebrities are propagating, get rich quick, the end justifies the means, as long as I can make it, and so on. How we get to develop another set of values that will appeal to something that is very strong in each human being.
Exactly.
And I have not met any human being who, when you confront them with those kind of situations, and you won't see empathy, you won't see compassion. So it is what we project for our young people.
Yes, Father. Because for me, and this is something I've observed over time in myself, because this happened to me and to other people, I believe that as young people, we all go through a phase. I think of it as the self-identity phase, where you were brought up, values were taught to you, virtues were explained to you over time. But you get to a point where you have to decide for yourself, why is this important, and is this something I want to adopt? For some, it could be while you're in university or serving, or when you just start working and you're faced with things that bring your values to question. And you get to that point, and yes, you can read and you can ask questions and study. But the point is, once you go through that process, for me, it awakens something in you where if you accept that, to own those values as something personal, like, I think this will work for me beyond what has been taught to me, you need to next take it into action, because that's only where it would now rise to a point where you can start doing things.
So the values that you learned at home, the values you learned in school, the values you learned in church, like in theory form.
Yes.
What you are saying is that there needs to be some practical engagement to put those values into practice. For example, the value of compassion.
Exactly. Yeah.
That the young person in the university, doing youth corps, whatever, you need to be able to engage in some activity confronted with issues requiring your compassionate touch, your generosity,
yes,
sacrifice.
Because once you can do that, and it evokes that emotional empathy in you for the first time, you find out that the people who you see, or the people we see around who are actually engaged and in long-term service to change things, are those who went through that phase and something stuck with them. Because again, people always, we always hear complaints about young people. And for me, one of the things I found interesting was a lot of people, volunteering is not a culture. for many young people here. And I remember going in once to find out if I could do something somewhere, and they looked at me, and once they found out I was a journalist, they strongly believed I had something to gain out of it.
Oh, they didn't think
it was honest. It took a lot of building up over time for them to actually trust that this was I had a pure intention. And so for me, it's like, we can always sit down and have long conversations complaining about how, no one is doing anything, people don't care. But in that one moment, that one person who decides, I realize, like, this is tragic that they don't believe I can help innocently. And you take that and you work on it. You're not only helping yourself, but you're changing the mindset of those people. And these things have ripple effects. So I'm like, my point basically is, once you can go through that process and once you can reach out to someone and it sticks with you, you find out that it becomes a long-term habit or a long-term attitude that you adopt. And as you're doing that, you're also impacting other people and changing their perceptions.
Talking about volunteering and lack of consciousness or awareness of volunteering in this society, there are structures and institutions in a place like the United States where you studied. There are structures and institutions that encourage volunteering. For example, you can't get into an Ivy League institution in the US if you have not spent some time volunteering, doing community service. It's part of the requirements, part of the points that will be ticked in your favor before you can be admitted. So it's not just your SAT score, but also have you volunteered somewhere. It doesn't appear to be a requirement in our institutions in this country. Because before volunteering becomes part of the culture, you need institutions that actually require it. So universities in the US require it. Even places of employment. Before you are employed, let's say, at the United Nations agencies, for example, they would like to know, where have you volunteered? And so perhaps we need to encourage companies, we need to encourage institutions, universities, and to include volunteering as part of their requirement for admission or for employment, so that in the process of the volunteering, young people now are confronted with issues that bring out their empathy, that bring out compassion.
Yes, and for me, this is because I've thought about this a lot, and I think this is one avenue that young people who have realized this can actually key in. You're talking about experiences and institutions that can make that setup. And if you can even get it up to a point where, like you said, from secondary schools, it begins. Because what we've noticed with young people and values, we can have like a 50-year-old, let's say, for instance, a 50-year-old telling a young person to do something, telling like a teenager to do something, and a 23-year-old telling the teenager to do the same thing. But that 23-year-old can relate or get across through that teenager with personal examples that the teenager can still understand. So if young people who have started to volunteer and see this need can start filling that gap, whether it's reaching across to schools, because before it gets to institutions, before institutions can start doing that, there needs to be like a mass understanding of a need for something. So even if young people can start filling those gaps, reaching out to whether it's public schools, private schools, start organizing a forum or an avenue for young people to volunteer, and they're seeing like a 23-year-old leading that, it's like, if this young person can do it, I can, and it looks cool to them. And that goes back to changing the culture of what is acceptable, like we started.
If you had opportunity to go to, let's say, a secondary school or a university now to address young people on the ongoing craze, what some people are calling a cult, the Malian cult. Our discussion has been beyond it in a larger level, but if you had opportunity to go to secondary schools where the teachers, the principal or teachers tell you that, look, I don't know what to do. A lot of these my students have become Malians and are exhibiting the traits of that crazy group. What will you tell them in a nutshell? Summary of what you will tell those students?
I think for me, it's, starting from the basic conversation where, again, trying to understand why they're where they are. So, I will try to understand, what is it in this person that is making you value them or look up to them? And if we can get that, my own explanation to them would be, think about where you want to be 10, 15 years from now. If you pass on, think about what you want to be remembered for. Are you thinking of even life beyond when you're gone? And so if we can establish what their end goals are, and then we can walk through the process and help them realize how, over fixating on celebrities and maybe processes that are just rushed to get to where they are, making them realize that that can't be the way there. And so if we come to that general understanding that that can't lead you there and that won't leave the best legacy behind for you, the same way your parents might have left for you, then what is the alternative? And then we walk through that.
And acknowledging, as we do that, acknowledging the fact that actually maybe a lot in the adult society have failed them.
Yes.
I mean, we must constantly acknowledge that we, the older generation, we have failed them, and that where the kind of society that has been created today on account of the failures of the adult society, it's not the kind of society they will desire to be.
Exactly.
And if you desire a new kind of society, a better society, then you have to put in some work.
It's like getting beyond blame to taking responsibility.
Good. Getting beyond blame to taking responsibility. And one of the responsibilities, avenues to take responsibility, start a group.
Exactly.
Start a group. Do something different. And I commend you for the little efforts that you are making with young people around. We've discussed some of that in the past. And I am just saying, what word, the last word, do you have for, let's say, parents watching this program about the care of their children, how to take care of their children? What word do you have for parents?
I think for me, it's remembering that as much as there's so much frustrating in the society as adults, you're thinking about their school fees and food for them. It's also essential to remember that everything this child is encountering, forget what you say to them, everything the child is encountering, from the way you react, the way you treat others, they're soaking it in. We're like sponges. They're soaking in everything they're seeing. And so once you can keep this at the forefront of your mind, you can draw strength from that and realizing and picturing what you want for your children when they grow up. And once you realize that, you will draw strength from that, hopefully, to get to a point where you can dedicate some time for your children. Holiday lessons are good, but beyond holiday lessons, what are the personal activities you have for them during the summer break? The opportunities to interact with them, ask them about school, but in a safe environment where they don't feel confronted. And finally, I guess for me, this is something you would reap from when these kids are older, in the relationship you have with them, and in just the joy that comes with seeing them well set up, not necessarily financially successful, but accomplished individuals in character.
On that note, I would like to bring this towards a close to say that parents really need time for young people. Parents need time for young people to set up your child towards making a lot of money in life. It's next to nothing, because your child could be a woeful failure even though you have set him or her up to make a lot of money if there are no values. And you are saying, Onize, that those values will be more solidly founded in the children, in the young people, when you spend time with them.
Yes.
And when you model the kind of life you would want them to live.
Exactly.
When you model the kind of person, the kind of adults you would want them to become, you are already living that in the way you relate with other people around you, which the children are seeing, in the way you relate with them, in your level of honesty, of truth, of sacrifice, of compassion. These are the things that will create a society, the kind of society we hope to bequeath for the future. It's been wonderful having you, Onize.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much. I've been speaking with Onize Ohikere, a journalist, correspondent for a US-based magazine, and we've been discussing the challenge of young people just following celebrities who have no values. She says it is parents that can lay the foundation, and the young people themselves, instead of just complaining about the adult society, can take some responsibility, take some initiative to build the kind of society that they desire to see in future. Thank you very much. We'll have another session with another young person to continue this kind of discourse. It is a time for young people to speak. Thanks for coming once again.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you.